Greetings. Welcome to our read along, the Parinama cover to cover read along here that we are now at. We're now at page 2, Parinama method. We're at page 249. And so, once again, if you caught the last one, right now, what we're seeing in the book as we're nearing this part of it, which is like coming closer to the end, is that the end begins to start folding back on the beginning. And yeah, so I'm going to start reading because I actually didn't do any sort of pre-thinking on this topic. I was thinking about some other stuff. So I'm just going to start reading and we'll see what comes up. So here we go. Now, ambiguity, and this is in chapter 10 for the 7th hub, as we're learning about the qualities of the 7th hub itself. So this is the ambiguity section. So you've done wonderful things and you've done terrible things, just like everyone else. Before you understand that other people can't fit into narrow categorizations, you first need to understand this about yourself. Ambiguity is in the massive space between two seemingly polarized opposites. And the moving and shifting of nuance within this space is where life occurs. There is very little, arguably nothing, that is fixed and absolute because life is dynamic and always changing. If binary classification worked, we could simply file away our judgments and be done with them, and they would be self-evident to all. But we cannot. Even though some folks become flustered and frustrated as they try to push others into categories that fit bigoted, dehumanized narratives, finding themselves in a futile struggle of trying to make people static and unchanging. I'm going to reread that. So this is saying that even though some folks become flustered and frustrated as they try to push others into categories that fit their bigoted, dehumanized narratives, finding themselves in a futile struggle of trying to make people static and unchanging. Nothing can be pure and nothing can be perfect. These hyperbolic descriptors elude us, taunt us, and destroy the experience of grace and joy. A so-called perfect rose grows out of mold and compost. It prefers worms in its soil and can draw blood with its thorns. Perfection and purity are not real. They are dynamic and living, and so much lusher and more prosperous than any notion of purity could ever allow. Yeah, it's really interesting to me as I read this and do know where this is going, because that's actually a first introduction to a building to a crescendo here that we get to in the 7th hub. I won't spoiler it. I almost want to read that again. We'll see what happens. I'm going to go back to chapter 3 on page 44. And I'm going to read the ambiguity and continuum versus polarity. So this is where ambiguity is first introduced. This book has been open for so long in the later pages that it's really hard to to get open right now. So, okay. If you're ready for this. So ambiguity and continuum versus polarity. So once again, it's ambiguity and continuum. So yeah, just as previously alluded or spoken of or written of in the last section, which is that there's, like the two sort of seeming endpoints on a spectrum tend to be considered like the two um, options. And, when they're like pretty minuscule and like to a certain extent almost non-existent. Anyway, let's see what comes up here. So, ambiguity is the infinity between two seemingly polarized opposites. Ambiguity is the infinity between two seemingly polarized opposites. There are countless shades of gray found between black and white. And when we attempt to pick a paint color, the different hues and tones appear endless. An apple in the grocery store and an apple core in a trash can are seemingly two different things, but they exist in a continuum from seed to compost. An apple is a moment in time, and even within that, there's changing states of what an apple actually is, what it contains, the state of it. And so an apple is a moment in time, and gray comes in numerous tints that can all be called by the same word, gray. Between apple and core and black and white is a field of infinite possibility. We expand our ability to see and appreciate nuance through awareness and extensive possibilities between so-called absolutes. Absolutism, this is good, that is bad, is suitable for the level of brain development in younger children. But as adults, part of maturation is expanding our belief systems to consider opinions outside our current thought patterns. Folks who are prone to absolutism tend to see the world as a place where nothing but the so-called best is acceptable. We can know a lot about people when they speak in absolutes, specifically that they could benefit from compassion. Yeah, it's a very harsh inner landscape that's being projected outward. It's not that you have to. It's not that is a job for you, by the way. It's just like, so one of the things that is mentioned is that everyone deserves love. Everybody deserves love and compassion. I don't know how much of that is being picked up on this, but it's literally like the car could be like sitting right next to me right now honking. But everybody deserves love. Everyone is deserving of love and compassion. But the key point here is that it isn't necessarily your job to be the person that gives it to them. And in some cases it's absolutely not your job, like your function, like part of your own like healthy boundaries in life. But let me discuss that in another section. Okay. Okay. And when we are prone to speaking in absolutes, we can know a lot about ourselves, specifically that softening absolute positions opens us to greater possibilities. Whew, yeah, there we are. We often resist ambiguity because it points to a less certain and less controllable universe. First hub stability supports the inner sense of containment and solid ground needed to feel more secure in and tolerant of the intellectual ambiguity necessary to understand yourself. After all, we contain multitudes. See Chapter 5. A polarized worldview makes understanding ourselves difficult. In an absolutist worldview, when we do something considered bad, we may believe ourselves to be a bad person. Making a mistake doesn't make you a mistake. Without the range of ambiguity, there is no room for redemption. Without the continuum between absolutes, there is no way to fully accept ourselves. And only when we accept ourselves can we be free to accept others. There it is. There it is. Let's see where we are. I might do paradox 2 now because I still have time. Yep, I'm doing it. Here we go. So paradox here on page 249. And we're going to go back to, it's going to be either page 43 or 44 in chapter 3. Paradox. So a paradox is logic that cannot be true and cannot be false. It's self-contradictory. Instead of thinking in terms of this or that, black or white, paradox is an ampersand of this and that, black and white, with possibilities and opposites existing together as they both challenge and strengthen the existence of their opposite. A paradox does not negate its opposition, but highlights how one truth can simultaneously oppose, contradict, and amplify its opposite. As with black and white, a paradox cannot exist in exactly the same place without becoming gray. But when juxtaposed, each makes the visibility of the other possible. It would be hard to understand or see white clearly without having seen black. And when placed beside each other, we can better see each of them because of their contrast. This is the phenomenon of complementary opposites. See chapter 3, which we will do shortly. And to be capable of simultaneously contemplating and comprehending them, we must loosen our grip on absolute certainty, which is the shadow of the seventh hub. Stay tuned. We're going there. This is an overwhelming and outrageous proposition for many people, contributing to why many struggle with this hub. If intellectual paradox is initially unappealing, practice it physically or experientially. Push down into the ground to rise up and achieve posture. Spend time away from someone to strengthen the connection, or experiencing this astonishing loudness of the silent treatment. It's a really good book. I would say it's pretty cool. So this part is going to actually be helpful. This one, this wrap around, reach around, where we get into paradox, complementary opposites on page 44. As I wrestle this book that has been sitting open at the later pages, it honestly feels like it's like this hand that's about to like slap me across the face. Oh my God. It feels very hand-to-hand combat. So the book starts sort of like taking on a, opposition to me. Okay, so paradox, complementary opposites. Let's do it. So we encounter paradox when seemingly opposite things enhance the existence of each other. And keep in mind, we're 200 pages apart right now. I'm surprised by how this is totally, it's to be an Allison thing, my editor, for keeping this like really non-redundant. Okay. We encounter paradox when seemingly opposite things enhance the existence of each other. For example, activity makes rest satisfying. Black makes white stand out as white does black, and we can feel most alive after having come close to death. When we look closely, we can notice that opposites tend to be complementary and together contribute to an emerging property and even breakthroughs of possibility. So each hub has one or more of these dichotomies in which one polarity cannot exist alone, such as pushing into our feet or seat to rise upwards. Okay, there's a little redundancy here. God. Central repeating paradox. is the need to belong that exists with the need to be free, the need to both follow your own arrow and find safety in the quiver. Below, I list some of the paradoxes in our hubs. So, roots to grow, pushing down to rise, like the attraction and repulsion of magnetism. Intimacy and distance, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Individuality, personal freedom, and belonging, connection. Gratitude, receiving, and generosity, giving. Speaking, finding the words, and listening, seeking to understand. Creating, self expression and validation, being seen. Knowing, certainty, and remaining curious, openness to new ideas. So, with those, yeah, I'm just going to leave those. I mean, some of these things where you have some folks who find these really, um, kind of, sometimes, like, you can see folks kind of landing at a stalemate about these things, about being like, "Well, I wanna be myself, but I also wanna belong," and that's actually, like, very deep at the heart of authentic self-expression, is that to belong involves making, concessions. It just does. There's no way around it. The notion of, like, um, being completely accepted for yourself is something that can only be happen within yourself. Because with someone else, like, one of the things you're colliding with the considerations that they require. And so out of love and out of consideration and out of making something work, what's the word for it? There's just a word for it, and I don't know why I always have a hard time finding it. Um, the word I'm using is concessions, which is close enough, but it's like, yeah. But that quality of being, and how those, like, are paradoxes to be managed, not resolvable as absolutes. And this is one of the things when we're talking about ambiguity, when we're talking about parallax, there's movement in these tensions, but these tensions exist in terms of this kind of manner of, like, validating each other's and creating each other's existence, creating the energy of existence, like a positive and negative polarity, creating like a charge in a, like for in like say like a battery, that it's like this is this quality of the fact that these opposing aspects in ourselves are active and changing. And so to lack the ability to contemplate ambiguity for oneself is to remain constantly at a gridlock stalemate mate about not understanding these needs, to have both of these needs that are complementary opposites, you know? Eros and Thanatos, like that. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so complementary opposites, yeah, it's in there. It's brought up quite a bit in here. We get back to it. And so complementary opposites, see chapter 6 and 7, are strengthened by the existence of each other, as if on a spectrum of hot and cold with infinite possible temperatures in between. Awareness of complementary opposites helps us better understand ourselves. Sometimes we want to be with people, sometimes we want to be alone. These dichotomies in our lives are dynamic, constantly evolving and changing, and exist on a continuum in the ambiguity and nuance of infinite possibilities. The difference between paradox and hypocrisy is that in a paradox, two polarities can be simultaneously true, which is the opposite of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy confronts us with two irreconcilable demands, such as a mother who tells her child, "You're not affectionate enough," but when the child shows affection, says, "You're acting like a big baby." Hypocrisy says one thing and does the other, a double bind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. and there's no way to win, but paradox strengthens its opposing force. And like a cool drink on a scorching hot day, greater capacity is realized through opposition. Hot and cold accentuate each other, unlike mixed messages that negate one another. Okay, we did it. Bye-bye. Where's my page? Okay. Did we do this one? Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. That's it. So that is it for now. Yeah. So next we'll talk about this one. The next two are great topics. Great topics. Yeah. One is, the portmanteau of emblem that I came up with, the witness to our consciousness actually. And then next, it's funny because it's page 251 is the hub identities, the different facets of our identities represented by hubs. And, one kind of funny note about this is that it's so late in the book and it's like such a banger. Yeah. It's really strong. But it makes sense here because it was actually something that was originally in the first part of the book. And as the book took shape in like really kind of wild ways and got whatever through the editing process, it's where it belongs. I mean, originally it was like a thing where it's like it helped with clarity about understanding the different hubs. So in the beginning, chapter 2 is really about starting to get some type of orientation about like what the different hubs are and being able to connect to them, but also showing, kind of doing an orientation for how each of these hub chapters are going to work, like as far as explaining what each of, like what initial development, basics, themes, etc. are, so it's like to understand this, it contextually. But the other idea I had was I wanted like folks to start to kind of like get the wheels turning about seeing these things. And also in a certain way, I wanted chapter 2 to be standalone, to be like a standalone notion of what the hubs are. So in a way, actually, this is probably a good way to put this, is that the kind of infinite loop of this book, also that part 1 was meant to kind of be like a standalone notion of the book to begin with, like just that it could be its own thing, that it would give you that it gives enough that you could just like do that. I just remember that. This just came up. Okay. All right. That's it for today. Sending you lots of love wherever and whenever you are. Let's see. Anything? Yeah, no, any comments I'll answer. Hasn't really been a thing. Haven't been any comments, but yeah, all interaction is like deeply appreciated. But ultimately for me, the thing that really matters is that this, like, honestly, is that this exists as a companion for folks who are reading the book. Let's see. Yeah. Just that it exists and that, yeah. It's support, that to offer support. Because here's the thing about this. I'll tell you right now, a little top secret here, buried in episode like 300. You don't really like the somatic practices as they become integrated as tools that can be like very easily incorporated in sort of dynamic management in one's life. to pull forward journaling, to pull forward tapping, to pull forward putting your feet in the grass, putting forward elephant ears, putting forward whatever techniques and exercises across the board, all of them. And in the table of contents, it gives the page numbers for all of them. So you can, if you want to just like bookmark them as resources to use outside of a process of reading the book cover to cover. But the thing is, if you just read a section and like this will passively work on you, it'll be a passive process that will start to unhook things. It's just you got to show up for this, like consistently. But what's possible is really extraordinary and highly disruptive to a status quo life. And so I think the gating aspect of it being kind of like a lush forest in terms of its accessibility, in terms of its denseness, in terms of what exists in this, is an important protection of it, is that you couldn't accidentally fall into this. I mean, even reading this today, where I'm like, these are just a couple of random pages, and the potency contained within just those passages, it's real. Okay. So anyway, sending you lots of love. Next time we'll do The Witness. And for those of you who are familiar with it, you'll be familiar with it. But we're incorporating it right now with the seventh hub as we're starting to, as we're in the process of like the learning section of really developing like a contemplation of what the hub is. And it's interesting to see in the seventh hub that we're dealing with these very sort of expansive, the nature of the aspects of this are very sort of expansive, and they lack the sort of density of the first hub. It's talk about a complementary opposite, and we need that density, as we'll get into in chapter 12 and beyond. But this is where it's like these things like ambiguity and paradox and this kind of like liminalness of like where the magic of is found and recaptured and reintegrated into the direct experience of being alive. It's found here. It's brought back down. But to bring it down, it's almost like you have to like clear the tube in a sense, like as it, I don't know if like of the calcifications that have sort of like blocked the walls and have the flow sort of restricted or completely blocked. So part of the doing the like dissolving the tangle and really softening and disintegrating the adaptations is making this possible. It's not easy. It's not easy. All right. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.